going to be hard to introduce.
No, I don't even think I see it here. I think I'm supposed to make that up.
Welcome.
I can introduce him afterwards. Yes. He needs no introduction.
All right, in all seriousness, what this amounts to is giving away our sovereignty as Americans in exchange for nothing. Get nothing out of this. And it's shocking that something like this is even under consideration. Look at the history that we're starting with here. NAFTA. The North American Free Trade Agreement has led to the loss of millions of jobs in the United States and done something that you wouldn't even think is possible. It's managed to impoverish both American and Mexican workers at the same time. The only ones who benefited from that are the multinational corporations who are getting cheaper American labor and cheaper Mexican labor. In the United States, we've lost millions of manufacturing jobs because of NAFTA. And in Mexico, millions of farm workers have been forced off their own farms because of cheap corn flooding into Mexico and preventing them from being able to make their own corn at a price that they can live on. So people have had to move off of the farms in Mexico and forced into further cheap labor supply to undermine our own standards. That's the result of NAFTA. And because of NAFTA and the World Trade Organization agreements that we've already entered into, we have already in existence is the beginning of the cudgel that corporations can use to beat us down on health standards, on labor standards, on environmental standards, on every standard that we want to create collectively as Americans. And that's already happened. I can give you some examples of that. It was mentioned before that there are many cases that are pending. Some cases have already been resolved. One of those cases involves the fact that dolphins tend to be in the same general vicinity in the oceans as tuna because they eat tuna. Dolphins in general are endangered species. And extensive efforts have been made by governments on behalf of environmentalists in order to prevent the capture of tuna resulting in the death of dolphins. So what you need to do in order to prevent that is to make nets that catch the tuna but don't catch the dolphins. So governments have made rules, including our government around the world, in order to enforce the rules on fishermen to have nets that are dolphin-safe nets. Well, the fishing companies didn't like that. They sued under the WTO rules, and they won. So our own rules to protect the dolphins are no longer considered legal as a result of a trade agreement that we've entered into. Another example of this is candy-flavored cigarettes. Candy-flavored cigarettes. Now, we have spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars trying to prevent teens from being hooked on cigarettes. And you may have seen the ads yourself on TV. That's one of the things that we do in order to try to prevent that kind of interference in parenting. Well, the government eliminated all flavoring in cigarettes 2 years ago as a result of this effort to try to keep candy-flavored cigarettes out of the hands of children. The cigarette manufacturers sued, saying that was a restraint on their trade rights, and again, they won. So now it is once again legal to sell candy-flavored cigarettes to children. Obviously, there'll be no end to this. Whether you're talking about health regulations, environmental regulations, safety regulations, and organizing regulations, whatever the laws might be, whatever the regulations might be, corporations are starting to use these trade agreements as a vehicle to throw out the laws that are meant to protect us from these corporations, against whom we have no recourse. So they can sue our governments to throw out our laws, but we can't sue them to enforce our laws. That's where this is, that's where it's heading. Now with regard to these specific agreements, both the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Investment and Trade Partnership, with regard to both of these agreements, the Obama administration has deliberately taken the view that they don't want people to know about them. In both cases, when the agreements first were the subject of negotiation, in both cases the administration voluntarily entered into an agreement with the other countries' negotiators that they would keep these agreements secret from us as they were negotiating them. Honestly, I'm not even sure what their legal authority is to do that. We've tried to look into it, we've tried to ask them, and we've gotten very unclear answers. But they thought that by making an agreement with the other countries that they keep it all secret, they could tie our hands as citizens, and we wouldn't be able to find out about it. Frankly, I don't know what's worse, not knowing what's in the agreement or what's in the agreement. Because to the extent we've been able to find out about these things, it's horrifying. There's been no effort made in these agreements up to this point, as far as we can tell, to protect labor standards. A very basic thing. Now, you'd think that given the publicity involving the Chinese use of prison labor, something would be done about this. Nothing is being done about this. There's been no effort to protect environmental standards. China has some of the worst pollution in the entire world, and their people obviously can't do anything about it. So what they do is they produce these goods cheaply by polluting their own environment, because they know that we have higher standards here, they can get away with it there. That's one reason why production moves to China. No effort made whatsoever in these agreements to try to equalize environmental standards. Or safety standards. You know, you've heard about over 1,000 Bangladeshis dying in garment factories to make the goods that we buy here in the United States. No effort at all to have occupational safety standards under these agreements. And on and on and on like that. Whatever the category might be, if it's for the good of the workers, for the good of the country, for the good of the people, there is no effort whatsoever in these agreements to try to enforce anything resembling international standards. It is in fact becoming a race to the bottom. So what's in them? Well, you might expect to find reductions of tariffs in these agreements. You might expect to find something resembling prohibition on taxing imported goods. Actually, we're way past that. Hardly anything gets taxed anymore when it comes to this country. There's nothing left to prohibit. Almost anything can come into this country now without any taxation that's at all serious. No, instead what they're doing in these agreements is exactly what's been described. First of all, what's happening already in these agreements is that they're setting up more multinational tribunals, these investor-state dispute resolution bodies, as they call them. And what these do is exactly what I just described. They're a vehicle for multinational corporations to sue sovereign nations like our own and win before these multinational tribunals, and then in doing so, either A, force us to repeal the law or regulation, or B, make us pay exorbitant amounts of money courtesy of taxpayers to subsidize them. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? One of the fundamental principles of law, both in America, in England, in virtually every country in the world, is called sovereign immunity. The sovereign cannot be sued in court. Period. Why is that? Because we make the laws, and the laws are imposed equally on everyone. So you cannot sue the sovereign in court. There's only one exception. You can only sue the sovereign in court if the sovereign approves. And on the basis of that one supposedly narrow exception, we have now opened the door and are continuing to open the door wide, really bust down the door, allowing multinational corporations to sue us to make our own laws illegal. What is the sense of that? Why would we ever be doing that? But that's become the fundamental purpose of both the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. It is, in essence, a fundamental waiver of our sovereign immunity solely for the benefit of multinational corporations and solely to throw out laws that are meant to protect us from them. That's it. That's what it's all about. So what we're doing basically is we are waiving our own sovereignty. We are throwing it away. We're tossing it away. And frankly, I don't really regard this as anything resembling a liberal issue or a left issue or even a trade union issue. I regard this as an issue that should be of concern to all Americans. Where is the Tea Party now?
That's exactly what I want.
Why are they not shouting at the top of their lungs about these trade deals? They ought to be. Dick Armey hasn't called for it. That's because Dick Armey's budget is funded almost entirely by multinational corporations. That's why. Yeah. So now, there's a process involved here, and we are already involved in attacking the process. It is in fact true that these agreements have been negotiated up to this point entirely in secret. I don't know how many of you know the Congressman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. Rosa DeLauro has tried time and time again to get the drafts of these agreements that are now in the third year of negotiation, almost the fourth year of negotiation. And Rosa has been turned down over and over again. A senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden, has demanded copies of the documents that are going back and forth, including the ones that we're sending to the other side, our U.S. Trade Representatives issuing to the other side. Again, completely no, got nothing, complained about it bitterly, made no progress. Last year, 110 Democratic members of Congress signed a letter to the U.S. Trade Representatives saying we must see these drafts. And they got nothing. That is the good part. We asked the Trade Representative for one specific document that represents the current draft of one of these negotiations. And we told them that if we didn't get it, we were going to subpoena it. And we're going to get to see it on June 4th. Or at least I'm going to get to see it. The current deal is they come to my office, they bring it with them. At this point, we're still negotiating this. I'm not supposed to have staff in the office. And I'm not supposed to take notes. But I have a feeling that they're going to find me very hard to do. So we'll see how that.
You're going to go out in the hall?
I'm going to do what Sarah Palin does.
There you go. Oh my goodness.
Just go out in the hall, let your staff see it in the hall, not in the...
Yeah, I may have to go to the bathroom. So that's where we are. Now, we have done, I think, really good work in elevating this already to the public's attention. One of these agreements, the one that's called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, that agreement was open for comments. The U.S. Trade Representative opened that up for comments 6 weeks ago. 113 comments were submitted almost entirely by corporate lobbyists. We have an email list of 200,000. We sent out a request for comments to our list, inviting people to go to particular websites to submit their comments. We got 10,000 comments in 24 hours. So now, and this is required by law, when the U.S. Trade Representative has to produce and publish a summary of the comments that have been submitted, he's going to have to tell people that 99.9% of the comments were against the agreement. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite you all to participate. And specifically, for those of you who are executives in your organizations, I'd like you to invite your members to participate. I'm going to get in touch with our nationals over the next few weeks and try to get their attention for this, because I think that this is something that is A, easy for people to do. You simply go to the website, fill out the form, your copy gets submitted. And B, actually will make a difference. I think that the trade representative is going to have to confess to the public that the public itself is wildly against these agreements. And that's going to make it very difficult for them to go on to the next steps. And there are two next steps here. The first next step is that they're going to try to reinstitute what's called fast-track authority in Congress. Fast-track authority is no longer in existence. The labor unions were able to successfully defeat it. What that does is it requires, when the president negotiates an agreement, it requires both the House and the Senate to vote on the agreement within a certain period of time without any amendments. And that's completely different from the normal legislative process. In normal legislative processes, a bill is submitted, you have hearings, you have what's called a committee markup, and then the bill goes to the floor, goes to the Rules Committee, people can submit more amendments, the amendments have to be voted on, then if you're lucky, it goes back to the floor, and people vote on the House, they vote on the Senate, and then there has to be some sort of conference committee to make those two bills harmonized so that there can be one final bill voted on by both the House and the Senate. All that gets thrown out under fast track. There's nothing like that. It simply goes right to the floor in both the House and the Senate without any changes within a specified period of time. It's pretty hokey because there's nothing else, literally nothing else, that gets that treatment except these trade bills. So they're going to try to reinstitute that. The president's going to ask for some amendments. After that point, the president will actually introduce these. I have no hope whatsoever that the president will make any effort to clean these things up. I mean, that's my honest opinion. I mean, he's the leader of my party. I voted for him twice. When it comes to certain issues like trade and like the environment, he seems to have a complete blind spot, frankly, like the right to organize. He seems to have a complete blind spot, just doesn't understand it, treats whatever the other side says as gospel, treats our side like dirt. I take no pleasure in saying that. That's my reading of the situation. So we can't count on the president himself to put anything in these bills that resembles what we want to see. Instead, what we have to do is organize, organize, organize. And this is the perfect vehicle for doing it. Right now, we can organize by getting people to go to the website tradecheck.com. Geez, some of you are writing it down, some of you are not. I don't get it.
We already talked about it.
Okay. Tradecheck.com and invite people to participate. You know, I'm proud that we've generated 10,000 comments in 24 hours, but why not 100,000? Why not 1 million? When the president was about to propose cuts in Social Security and Medicare benefits a couple of months ago in his budget, our office, the Grayson office, delivered almost 3 million petitions to the White House saying that people were opposed to that. So now we're starting over again with trade. First 10,000, then 100,000, then 1 million. And at some point they'll understand that the people are against it and that this will have consequences. You could see this become the major issue in the next year's elections, but only if we make it that way. Once again, we have to protect ourselves. You know, I feel a certain discomfort coming before you and saying to you, we have to prevent this from happening. I wish we could have some kind of positive agenda. You know, I'd like to see more respect for the right to organize in this country. I'd like to see better wages, better benefits. We've introduced a bill that would raise the minimum wage to $10.50. So I'm doing my part. We've introduced a bill that would require at least 1 week of paid vacations for every worker in the United States. So I'm doing my part. But for now, all we can do really is just prevent things from getting worse. And this would make things much, much worse. Another provision that's being negotiated in these agreements, which I did not mention to you before, is they want to set up a private immigration system. Multinational corporations will be able to hand out visas to their employees and their families. And the government will not be involved any longer. So, you know, this is also on the table. There's been specific proposals to put that in the second of these two trade agreements. So, I mean, unfortunately, we just have to stop it. We have to prevent this, and then hope that at some point we'd actually try to make things better. Right now, we have to make sure things don't get worse. So that's where we are. We appreciate your help, and we need it. So thank you very much.